Okay, once, twice, we're on air. Good morning, good afternoon. And thank you for having me here, speak to you great fine people on this Tuesday afternoon. Scrum Beers, right? Is that what the name of the
Oh, yes, yes, that's right. We're Scrum Bears Halifax meetup. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to you guys. Thank you for having me and thank you for hosting this thing. So the original agreement was, I mean the agenda was the title. Hey, we're going to talk about large scale Scrum. In fact, it is pronounced less, just less. Not we don't say LESS, we just less. Um, so I actually have no aspiration to upsell, to promote, or to explicitly speak about large scale Scrum. I make it sound like this is the best thing since sliced bread, or this is the most successful way to do things. In the world of Agile, that would be just too self-serving and too, and just we won't really gain any credit. I will not gain much of your attention because I will just sound like any other anyone else who has some commercial interest in upselling a framework with a tool. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that will do this happily. So I was really hoping to have this conversation really based on I would want it to be a conversation more than a presentation first, and secondly, I don't have a deck. I have lots of graphics to share, and I'm going to actually I'm going to share my screen now. Just let me make sure. Let me close a few unnecessary windows here. One second. Well, you know what? How about we do this while I'm doing this? Let me ask you this open-ended question. Well, when it comes to scaling, what does it mean to you? What sort of thinking does it engage in your brain? What is scaling to you? It's an open-ended question, and anyone can pick it.
More than one team.
Multi-team.
One team. But Mark, what are we scaling?
Well, it could be we're scaling a solution that's larger than what one team can handle from various perspectives.
By the way, your voice is rumbled. I'm not sure why.
Is this better? Is this better?
Oh yeah, now it's much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I was suggesting,
yeah,
if you're working on a solution that's larger than what one team can handle for whatever reason. I mean, it could be cognitive load, or it could be some other reason, but
okay.
that's the first instance of scaling. I mean, it goes all the way up to the enterprise, but
so scaling could be multiple teams. So that's what I'm hearing. Anyone else? Like Sylvie, you have your hand up. Maybe you want to.
Yeah, I was going to say replication of whatever basis you're working with. Can it sometimes have to be tweaked a little bit? But there's a foundation in what you've built and what you're doing, let's say with one team, that you can turn around and say, you know what, I can probably replicate this or massage it or tweak it a little bit so that it could grow into a number of additional teams, or even at the enterprise level. Again, you have to kind of, I would say, pick and choose what you can bring at the enterprise level. But to me, there's a foundation there. That means that you don't have to start from scratch on the whiteboard again and say, okay, what do I do next, type of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the word enterprise. So scaling and the word enterprise actually came into mind also. And okay, so number of teams, scaling to the So by the way, what does it mean to scale to the enterprise level? What would that essentially entail?
in my mind, that's portfolios.
Portfolios.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's a portfolio? And again, I'm not testing. I'm just trying to engage.
No.
Proactive
for-
implementation.
For me, it's a collection of related products.
Okay, so fair enough. So portfolio is a collection of related products. Does it also assume that what we call a product is really a product? Or just a body of work? Because that wouldn't be the same, right? You may have a collection of work that is not necessarily translated into a product.
Yeah, well, in my context, it's more individual products.
Products, okay. Customer centric,
So-
user focused, yep, products, okay.
Yeah, and if you're bundling a solution, it may include one or many of those products.
Okay. Multiple products may give a solution, okay. Cool, so we kind of covered the word scaling, we at least touched upon the word enterprise. Anyone else? Sylvia, you have your hand up still, so.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it could be also a group or related to a product or a project of processes that basically end up needing to be reviewed or re-engineered because of a new type of project or a new product or a group of products within a portfolio that basically has interdependencies, and where you say we need to review the entire, process mapping of this portfolio or a number of projects or products, I think.
Let me
to
ask
bring
you
it
a question. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, to bring it to an enterprise level. So you eliminate, like in a lean environment, you eliminate the waste and the duplication and so on and so forth.
But let me ask you this question now. You, by the way, mentioned something, another interesting term, dependencies. So is management of, when we manage dependencies skillfully, is it a good thing? Let me rephrase that. Is dependencies management a good thing?
In my book, yes.
Okay, but compared to what?
Just in general, when I say I'm very effective at managing dependencies.
Because I think,
Is it a good statement, or am I making myself look good?
well, I think it's not a good statement if you can eliminate the dependencies to start with.
Okay, very good. So eliminating dependencies is much better than actually managing them. True?
Yeah, but the first step is identifying the dependencies.
Okay, we identify the dependencies.
And then when you identify the dependencies, you won't necessarily get rid of them right away, because it could involve re-architecturing your solution.
But
So-
I'm trying to get to a point that hopefully this is not overly inflaming. So if I have, like you said it right, I identify a bunch of dependencies, and now I'm at a crossroads. A, eradicating them, blowing them out of the sky, reducing them. B, effectively, skillfully managing them by applying very effective dependency management techniques. What's better, A or B?
Well, getting rid of them is better than managing them.
What if you have, let's say, a decent number of individuals within your organization whose whole responsibility is to manage dependencies? What would it mean to their jobs?
They're all dependent on each other because they're dependencies.
But what would it mean to
So-
their jobs? So if I no longer need to manage dependencies, they're gone, no longer. What happens to dependency managers?
They're gone.
They're gone. So, okay. I'm kind of giving, this is a long shot at saying, so sometimes we may have it's called local optimization. We're locally optimized we're locally optimized for a single status quo, single specialty worker whose whole job is to do something that essentially needs to go away. And of course, it raises the question, if we optimize for the wrong thing, we might be optimizing for things that actually from the enterprise, from the ecosystemic perspective, from the ecosystemic level, are not suitable, are not beneficial. So you may have actually those dependency managers may be very much interested in not seeing dependencies go away. Because if those dependencies go away, their role is going to go away. Unless they are skilled enough to be repurposed to do something else. So I want to go back. So this is a good warm up. I had one slide open here, and I can tell you, I'm on a different day. I'm just a cartoonist, not paid one. I'm not a good one, But I create these graphics that are sometimes like a picture of 1,000 words, right? I'll put it to use, I'll share it with others, and maybe we'll, fire up a light bulb or something. So I've boiled it down to myself. These 3 words are grotesquely perverted and grotesquely abused in the industry. The word agile, actually, I recommend not using it at all. It's a bad word.
Yeah. Plus one on that one.
Yeah. And if you go back into history, during the Agile Manifesto, co-creation, the word adaptive was the primary word to be chosen. It was not used because someone at Snowboard Utah actually had a company and a book written with the word adaptive in it. So they said, you're gonna get all the business. So they went with the word agile, which is actually not an easy word to understand unless you're like in sports or in military. So that aside, and everything under the sun these days is agile, right? So the word adaptive actually is a good litmus test. Can you adapt and turn on a dime for a dime without breaking a leg? If the answer is yes, so you're probably using the word agile correctly. If the answer is no, most likely you're misusing it. So the word enterprise, and I'm giving this away now, but let me ask you a question. You work for a large organization, XYZ Bank or XYZ large consultancy, and it's 500,000 people strong. But you are only, you're secluded within the CTO tower, the only structure that you can influence, if at that level, most likely not, it's not that easy. Within the CTO tower, you are able to influence, 10, 15, even 20 teams, all pure developers, hopefully, some, other techies, people that actually roll into the IT line of business. In fact, we shouldn't be calling IT, we should call it research and development. Is this an enterprise? Silence. I'll argue no.
I'll say no.
It's a large organizational department.
It's a silo.
I'm sorry?
It's a silo.
It's a complete silo. Thank you, Mark. It's like an enterprise Voyager. Just because its thruster is so huge does not mean it's an enterprise on its own. However, if you work for a small company, like 50 people, 100 people, and you are able to touch multiple organizational domains with the effort, of course, not excluding, including business and operations, site strategies, absolutely imperative, HR norms and policies, funding and budgeting. Then you can rightfully claim, okay, well, we're talking about an enterprise, small size enterprise, small size company, but it's an enterprise level. I would say, and I'm going to apologize, hopefully I'm ignorant, I'm not asking who has what title with which company. 99, there could be exceptions, and hopefully you guys are. 99.99999% of job titles or roles that you see on LinkedIn or with large organizations that say enterprise agile coach actually has got 2 abused words in it already. And one of them is the word enterprise. They are clues about enterprise level improvements, systemic improvements. They are probably secluded. They're probably secluded with some organizational structure, organizational tower called Agile Center of Excellence, or Agile Transformation Office. By the way, those have dramatically been reduced in size and numbers at large companies that I know. They're more lucky if they work with lines of business and actually embedded with business lines and products. But that would be actually a good example of the word enterprise going wild and off tracks. And on this image alone, the last but not least, the word scaling. And I think it was either Sylvie or Brenda who mentioned scaling something that you don't have enough of, the goodness of. So in order to scale something and produce, so let me rephrase that. If you have some dysfunction and a mission and pitfalls to begin with, poorly designed team, bad relationships, bad organizational alignment, poor performance, bad across the bank. But you want to scale just because it's the next, the next shiny object everyone wants to jump on. What you're gonna do? What you're gonna end up with? You're
More
gonna.
bad.
I'm sorry.
I said more bad.
Well,
Yeah.
bad. You're gonna scale this function. You're gonna amplify this function to the higher power, and someone's gonna pat themselves on the back, say, "Well, look, we have scale." What do you mean you have scale? Well, we now have 50 agile teams in some team registry, and they all are skillfully, effectively managing cross-team dependencies through the Jira or some other project management tool of reference. So that's essentially an amplification of bad stuff. Why would you do that in the first place? So it begs the question, in order to scale something, wouldn't you want to have some goodness in the first place to start with? And I originally asked this question, what do we want to scale? So there was an option to scale teams. There was an option to scale, there was another the word enterprise came up. I'm going to generally ask this question. If I were able to, this is my product. This is it's a coffee mug. If I wanted to scale its production, and ironically I have two. If I wanted to scale its production, let's say have more delivered every week, every sprint, and I had two options: improve. Let me give you the second option. Add another team that would be able to do just the similar job. So two teams would be working. So I got these cans have cover. So there would be one team that would be doing just the canister, the container, and the other team would be doing the cover, and the third team might be doing something like price and label. Or that's option one, just add in another team. Or maybe I should improve the way my initial team is working, and by doing so, enabled him to produce everything from soup to nuts, the canister and the cover and the pricing label. Oh, and I should have said, with the first approach that I described, there was a high risk that one team would be hyper-productive and will produce, let's say, 10 covers for only 3 or 4 or 5 canisters per sprint. So I would have a surplus of these coffee mug covers. What am I going to do with them? So what's the better way to do it? With one team that does maybe slightly slower, but from soup to nuts, or with two teams or maybe more teams that go supersonically fast in their own dimension of work?
Less
think
but usable.
I'm sorry?
Less but usable.
Nicholas thinking less but usable. So maybe 3 or 4 cups altogether from soup to nuts that are actually sellable, as opposed to producing a bunch of extra cups or a bunch of extra covers without canisters, right? I would tend to agree with this actually, because why produce like you look at the automotive assembly line. Imagine if there was one assembly line that was producing engines and the other assembly line was producing transmissions. And the assembly line that was producing engines would be supersonically fast, producing 500 each month. And there would be only 250 transmissions each month.
Mhm.
So what would you do with 250 engines? Each assembly line is a componentized team. So this is my long way of saying, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to add it, another way to look at it is from the angle of the theory of constraint. And if your constraint is the number of cups, there's no point in adding a team to produce an overabundance of covers.
Correct, I agree.
Right? So if your constraint is that one team, then look at that constraint and see how you can use them more effectively before you start adding resources.
I would not disagree. I would actually agree, Mark. So here in the middle of the graphic, and there's only one typo. The component B appears twice, should be C, D, and E. What does it look like at a glance? Oh my God, look, 5 teams.
We're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not. I thought you.
No.
Second, let me make sure you are again. Must have done something to stop sharing. I am sharing. Am I not?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah.
You're on the Scrum
Okay.
anti-patterns, right?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Oh yeah. You scared me for a second. I wasn't sure if I was. Yeah. Indeed, I'm.
Okay, I'll reconnect.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Mark. Here's the middle of the screen, right? You got 5 teams: component A team, component B, component C, component D, component E. 5 teams side by side. They're not even staggered. They're on the same feeding schedule. The start and the finish at the same time this sprint. But wait a minute. Nothing is deliverable until the very, very, very end. Why? Because these are component teams. So one of the biggest organizational emissions that I have seen, especially with large enterprise level companies like we're now, is they like the word scaling, and they think if they just relabel a bunch of X used to be ... teams into Scrum teams or into Agile teams, they will actually solve the problem. They don't change, in essence, the organizational design and the team structure, team design. And they just copy paste existing teams side by side. So what they end up seeing is lots of teams that used to be component teams, now remaining component teams, but now with a little add-on or with a little prefix, Agile teams or Scrum teams, which essentially do not qualify for the very basic definition of a Scrum team because they don't deliver anything that's potentially shippable at the end of the sprint. So at a glance, and I'm deliberately not using any other commercially successful frameworks that exist out there to, I don't want to bash them. I don't want to say anything derogatory, but think about this, and I'm sure you can associate it with some of your past experiences. If you got 10, 20, 30 teams side by side, sprinting, even on the same cadence, you may create an illusion. Hey, look, we have scaled Scrum, 30 teams. But wait a minute, they don't integrate until the very end. They don't deliver until God knows when. They sometimes secretly call it a product increment or a release plan that will be 2 or 3 months out. Well, that doesn't it defeat the whole purpose of Scrum? Doesn't it defeat the whole purpose of iterative development? Probably. So scaling should not be goal. At least in my world, scaling is the necessary evil that we have to deal with in order to scale goodness on what we have in the first place, but not enough of. So if I could deliver the same product using one team, I would do that. If this product grew bigger and I had a bigger jar, a bigger coffee cup, I would still try to emphasize learning and intra-team capabilities to make that team capable of delivering a bigger product. And if I came to realize that the greatest of one team, what they can deliver in one sprint is just not enough, they're doing an amazing job, but it's just not enough of that amazing work that they do, I would consider adding another team with the same capabilities, with the same skill set, just to amplify, just to clone the goodness. And in fact, I wouldn't be making this into a special team. I wouldn't be making this into a team that has a single specialty function, single specialty people working just on one part of the system, one part of the product. That would actually defeat the purpose again, because I would create the very dependencies that we just said at the beginning of the session we would like to eradicate. So these teams are hardly dependent on one another. Hard dependencies mean component A team cannot release to production until they fully integrated with component B, C, D, and E. Wheels do not, well, maybe automotive is not a good example. But when you buy a radio, right, or buy an iPhone, no one in their right mind is gonna go out and buy a screen on its own, or buttons on its own, or transistor on its own. You want a product, which is, by the way, even more mature way to describe an individual feature. A set of customer-centric features would constitute a product. So organization, and let me step back and actually give you another statement here. I will not be talking about less huge at all. This is just something I'm going to mention in passing for very large products. The goal is not to scale, first and foremost. The goal is not to adapt less or less huge or anything else that has the word scaling in it. It is not because the organization is big. And this is how I would like to challenge some of their historical beliefs that if you are an enterprise, you need to scale. Least likely is the case. You probably need to descale. And I'm going to explain in a second what it means. You really want to scale only when you are doing something good and you don't see enough of it and you want more of it. And then, of course, you want to amplify the goodness. Otherwise, you're going to end up with 5, 25, 55 component teams with 54 points of asynchronous dependencies that are extremely difficult to manage, extremely expensive to manage. And you're going to have most likely 54 very skilled dependency managers that are not cheap people either, managing those dependencies. That's a crazy thing to do. Anyone who's got a mindset of an entrepreneur or a business person with an acumen of a business person, or anyone who runs their own business would never ever want to do this. They would never want to optimize for single function specialty support the role. They would want to simplify their org structure. They would like to reduce it. This is why, by the way, in the previous slide here, the word descaling comes into play. In order to scale goodness, oftentimes we need to descale organizational complexity. We need to reduce organizational, we call it organizational mud, waste. And by doing so, create an environment where we can actually scale goodness. It's like almost like in order to build a bunch of skyscrapers, you need to clean the debris, you need to clean the soil, you need to make it very flat, very hard. Okay. And of course, a bigger question is, do we fall into the trap of just relabeling existing organizational structures and concatenating them with the word agile? We used to have a portfolio structure that had lots of programs underneath it, that had many projects underneath it. And lo and behold, each one of those would have a manager, a portfolio manager, a program manager, a project manager. Well, the cheapest way to solve this problem is just to relabel it as agile. Okay. And a little more on the same, if I may, just pause for a second to show you. Somewhere I had it, somewhere handy, but I don't see it right away. So I'm going to use this one and allude to budgeting. This is a very traditional way organizations do budgets. And this probably ties right back to the way we manage individual teams. We call it vanity metrics, fake stuff, velocities, stuff that's almost meaningless these days because the way they're being done. If you roll them up into programs, you're going to have a bigger number. And if you then roll into portfolios, you're going to have a bigger number. And you have a bunch of those. And finally, you're going to roll it into an enterprise velocity. And God knows, I've seen companies that do that. Why do we need that? Why do they need that? Well, it's easy. Because based on this fake number, complete fugazi, if you know what that means, complete fake diamond, a completely fake diamond, they will do cascade down traditional budgeting by just rolling numbers down below. Of course, this is going to end up funding component teams, delivery teams, application teams. Certainly not customer-centric, not product teams, as we call them, product or feature teams. Because the way we align our budgets is very different. It's very traditional. Sylvia, I'm gonna take a question while I'm gonna be looking for the slide, please.
I hear you, and this is not the first time that I'm hearing this.
Mhm.
But then whoever manages at the C-suite level this enterprise,
Mhm.
and whoever is quote unquote funding it,
Yep.
either private equity or public equity, whatever the case may be, how do you answer to those people where they're investing money
Mhm.
in this ABC company, irrespective of the size, a little bit more stringent or um, how can I explain this? More under scrutiny if you're on the capital market, on the stock market. But how do you explain this to them so that they can go back and talk to the analysts and the investors so that they can continue to get funding? As I said, I'm not saying I disagree, but
Okay,
because,
so
yeah,
the question is, how do you, by the way, that's the slide I was looking for. Another, again, everything is irony, right? If we don't laugh, we don't smile, we're gonna have to cry. I'd rather smile than cry. So your question, Sylvia. So good. How do I, and let me know if I'm not rephrasing you right. How do I convey, how do I educate my senior executive to change the tone and the message when they communicate with investors? Is that right?
it's not only changing the tone, okay? The investors and the analysts are looking for numbers. That's
Number.
how they measure you, okay? Now, as I said, if it's public equity, you're on the stock market, you're even more under scrutiny. If it's private equity, then at one point there's a board sitting somewhere of investors, private equity investors, and I'll speak for here in Quebec, and Mark, you can relate. Some of them are our largest Canadian pension funds who sit at the table and say, you know what, before I continue to invest millions of dollars into your company, I need to see some numbers, and I need those
Okay.
numbers to make sense, and they need to be audited and so on and so forth. There's standards. And then I'm going to complete with that. Again, I speak for Canada, and Jean, I guess you're based in the States, but
Yeah,
not
well,
as stringent.
wouldn't be any different, right?
Yeah, but the ESG, you know, what we call here environmental, social, and governance, you know, financial markers or KPIs are starting to be important. So
Yeah.
how do you, you know, how do you, I guess, make peace, if you want, with those two very diverging views here?
So first of all, it may seem silly. Your question is valid. It's got, it may seem simple, but it's super loaded because it sounds like, how do we answer to those people that give us money? Not in so many words, right? So
Yeah.
people, yeah. So whether it's a privately traded company, or publicly traded company, or not traded company at all, like you know, moms and pop shop, it probably doesn't matter. In fact, with a smaller company, it's easier to talk about this. First of all, let me ask you. Let us answer this question. What do our customers pay for? Do they pay for projects, programs, portfolios that they cannot touch and feel, or do they pay for products?
To me, they pay for the whole gamut.
Well, I'm a customer, so give me an example where I would pay for someone's portfolio or for someone's program or project management or methodology.
Because if I'm going to buy something,
Mhm.
product, you know, whatever, tangible or service, then I'm looking for longevity into the company in which I'm buying. So
That's a true statement. I agree
yeah,
with you.
if
So
that
first of all,
company doesn't have a long-term view, and I'm not saying, you know, 10 years down the road, but at least three, depending on the life cycle of the project or the product or service. And if they don't have that view, then I'm buying something that may not be available in 6 months or, you know, 1 year, whatever, down the road. Okay, so again, at one point, and I realize I'm being a pain in the ass here, okay, because I have that dichotomy because of my background. But at one point, somebody pays for this. Somebody puts capital money, unless this company is self-sufficient. I'm going to backtrack here, and can live out of its own cash flow, doesn't need the banks, doesn't need investors, doesn't need anything, then by all means, knock yourself out. But
so again,
the majority of companies don't. And then I'll add this, because as you can see, I'm getting a little bit irated. We're in tough economic times right now.
It's irrelevant. Let me
Excuse
explain
me?
why. Let me explain why. Well, so I should say it's irrelevant whether or not someone wants to. Let me backtrack for a minute. What is relevant here is that you as a customer, or I as a customer, want to buy a quality product and make sure that you said it right. The company that sells it is in good standing and it's around for a while and will stay around for a while. That's relevant, but it's completely irrelevant to me, at least as a customer. I will be faking myself. I will be fooling myself if I thought it is important how they run their business internally, and I wanted to know whether they manage this in a very methodical, pragmatic way or not. As an end customer, I want to see a quality product. So unless I'm an audit of some sort and I care to see, the documentation. So I think we're trying to compile everything in the same bucket. And all I'm trying to do is to separate. I'm trying to separate noise from the signal. And what I'm sensing is that when someone is saying, I'm going to buy a product only if you have a great portfolio of programs and projects, to me that sounds a little kludgy. Because as a customer, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of a customer, I care about high quality product. Whether they use Scrum, large scale Scrum, or a very traditional, very conventional waterfall, which I love, given the current state of Agile, I don't care. What do you agree or disagree from what I just said?
It's not that I agree or disagree, okay? And again, I'm going to speak here for Canada mostly. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, okay? But we're coming to a point right now, not in every field, to be honest with you, where people do care. And again, public equity, capital market, or stock market is, how can I explain this?
Simple words.
I'm sorry?
In simple words. Well, we can speak layman terminology.
No, because I'm sorry. There's a clarity and transparency of information that is needed and required on the open stock market that is not necessarily, some of them do, necessarily required in private equity, okay, or what we call closed capital market, okay? But now more and more, again, I can only speak for Canada, okay, more and more people want to understand. I agree with you, it's not a question of method, but it's more so a question of, at enterprise level, the processes, the methodology, doesn't matter which one it is. Again, I'm trained in both Agile and Waterfall, but that there is a sense of continuity and structure and rationale behind the choices that are made and how this product or service is being delivered.
So for the sake of time, I want to move on a little more.
Because I'm going to be checking off in 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we don't disintegrate and trivialize the actual subject and deviate in the tangent. From what you said, nothing seems to be wrong. You want to have accuracy, predictability, reliability. We haven't gotten to a point where we can fairly scrutinize the way, and in fact, I barely said anything about large scale Scrum, so we can't really scrutinize it, right? We basically talk about common sense now, and we're trying to expose dysfunctions and emissions of many companies, and also at the enterprise. At the industry level, how the industry perceives these terms and how much derailment we have seen. So far, we've talked about most about dysfunctions. I don't disagree with you that when I buy a product, I want to buy it from a sound company. I wouldn't buy it from some schlock house even if I bought a sweatsuit, right? But at the same time, so far we haven't said anything that is contradictory to that. And by the way things are ran in Canada most likely is very similar to the way they're run in the States or any other place. Give or take. I don't. Let's not make this into a conversation. So
okay.
Back to the point where we kind of deviated on the tangent. we were talking about customers. And Joe, I like the idea that you brought up. The question was about what do customers say. So customers buy products. They buy products that oftentimes are accompanied with services. And of course, if there are multiple releases, they might be buying more features for the same product. But that's what clients are willing to pay for. And that's what our internal users, because there's no such thing as internal client, right? Unless we want to get out of business. Internal users use. So we use products and features of products. As a client, as a customer, in my right mind, I would not pay a penny to a company that was selling me the idea of a great project management, or a great program management, or a great portfolio of activities that did not give me any tangible. In fact, if you go back in history, Scrum wasn't created for project management or program or portfolio management. It was introduced for product management, mostly for software product management, but in large-scale Scrum, and also in Scrum, if it's a small product that we're dealing with, it could have hardware and software, but it's a product. And of course, the economics of this are not trivial. And this is what this is one of my, probably one of my favorite ones when I talk about economics. When you look on the on the left-hand side, this is what you see with a typical large organization that wants to jump on a bandwagon of agile transformation and scaling. Most likely we're dealing with a very traditional, multi-layered organization. Management, senior executives, support usually in spirit. Don't talk to me about this, talk to my subordinates. They're really not involved. They will probably write a check. We call this transformation, we call these scaling approaches as broad and shallow. We call them big bangs too, because usually thousands and thousands of people are superficially touched upon, but no deep and narrow, nothing penetrates deep into your enterprise. It's peppering, it's superficial. Of course, very little experimentation goes on, and you can actually parse you can actually parse the rest of the bullets there. And if you really want to come from the economics perspective, you will read the last line: high, unpredictable investments. Because they come typically from large consultancies or from internal agile transformation centers of excellence, or like optimized structures, local optimized structures, they're not small. You cannot really sell a small solution to a large organization and make money. So that's why you shouldn't be expecting a small solution from a large consultancy. It's almost a definitional or highly probable, I should say. Okay, so you end up with a highly unpredictable, very risky, highly risky and unpredictable investments. And God knows, and I'm sure you've been around those situations where things don't work out. When dust settles, those that have taken it there, they're out the door. They either move on, they disengage, and you have to deal with your own trouble. Again, I'm not upselling or explicitly promoting the idea of logical Scrum. And of course, this is not a session for that. This is a session to maybe give you some aha moments. But when you look on the right hand side, you're dealing with a very small, relatively small organizational design improvement. And this is where I'm going to be hitting the nail on the head. It's an organizational design improvement. Comes in the form of descaling, delayering, flattening. That, first of all, requires an informed consent, which means I know exactly what I'm getting myself into, and I'm willing not just to sign a bill, but actually roll off my sleeves and do the job from the senior leadership, from true leadership, not just from the management layer. We also recommend taking the approach of what's called a parallel organization. It's like creating a Vatican in the middle of Rome, or separate this out, create an environment where you can actually thrive and succeed. if you try to shove it underneath the existing org structure, you will just, like a macrophage eats, remember from microbiology, macrophage eats whatever is in your bodily fluid. That's what a large organization will do to your genuine attempt to improve agility. Again, very deep and narrow. We don't say thousands of people off the bat. Maybe a few dozen, 30, 40, 50 developers. And we, of course, we're going to carve out the organizational structure so that the bare minimum required is present, which absolutely, unquestionably, unequivocally involves HR improvements, HR norms and policies, career path, promotions and compensations. The beloved, the aforementioned budget and finance. We need to take make a very, very strong conscious effort to define real products. Portfolios, if we are lucky enough at the end of the day to produce a short list of true customer-facing products, independent products, truly independent products that could be portfolioized, so be it. As long as we don't call everything under the sun a product. Another cartoon that I would like to share for your information would be, I think this is it. Productization gone wild. Everything under the sun, everything that moves, call it a product. Shove it underneath the so-called portfolio of products and off you go. So we have to make sure we do this right. And then, of course, budgeting and funding, flowing of funds should be through products. And of course, our teams should be funded in a very different way by products they support. And of course, teams would be built very methodically and very thoroughly around a product, as opposed to defining products. Team structure should not define a product. It's the other way around. Product definition should define how we are structuring our teams. And I'm looking for this pretty important slide here. For many organizations, this could be a complete, like almost 180 degrees reversal to what they did today. If you think about the productization discussion we just had a second ago, like everything under the sun is called a product now. You don't really change the org structure. You don't change team composition. You don't change your career path. You don't change how developers, learn and how they become cross-functional M-shaped developers. Then, of course, it is least likely you're going to be changing your product definition. So you have to start with a product definition. So in a few minutes that's remaining, I'm going to summarize almost in 30 seconds what a large-scale Scrum is. And we're going to have a few extra minutes to talk, if you would like. A large-scale Scrum is an organizational design framework that supports product-centric development by multiple teams, usually multi-site. Products are very large, from largish to very large. Teams are structured around products and are called feature teams, aka product teams. Managers are optional, and only very senior executive managers that are able to enable and remove impediments, hold conversation and a huge conversation and so on. We don't scale for the sake of scaling. We scale only to amplify the greatness, the goodness of what one team could do, but isn't enough. But we don't agree this is enough. We want more of it. I think we also need to make a stress on productization done the right way. It's very thorough, very methodical approach we need to take in order to define our real products and take the time. We don't need to rush through it. Of course, defining a real product owner, not a fake, not a fugazi, not a surrogate, not a proxy. It's super critical. And in order to scale beyond one team, we need to descale organizational complexity by removing everything that sits in between. Coordination, excessive coordination, dependency management, going between silos, translation layers. We remove this. It's almost like we're creating an environment where a few rescue teams can work completely autonomously. on their mission to save someone who is stuck in the Rocky Mountains. While they're being fully autonomous and capable of completing the task, they communicate with each other, coordinate directly to amplify the goodness of one team's capability. So large-scale Scrum is not copy-paste of the existing component team multiple times. Large-scale Scrum is Scrum by multiple teams as opposed to multiple teams Scrum, if that makes sense. So I'm going to pause for now because we just scratched the surface. And by the way, we learned this deeply by doing a systemic. So we learn large-scale Scrum through organizational design and system thinking, which is a pretty comprehensive journey with system modeling, with understanding the whys behind, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, this is better because we said so," because this is less. And of course, with AI and the way our industry is rolling, it is most likely that it's like survival of the fittest. Like probably there will be more recognition for what we have been saying for the last 20, 25 years in years to come. Because it has a lot to do, and I'm sorry to say this, it has a lot to do with
Thank you, Gene. Thank you for being here. I don't know if we have like 1 minute for questions or not. If you want to do that, or just go.
Sure, I was actually budgeted to stay for a little longer, but go ahead. I'm done. Go ahead, Brenda.
You're up for some questions if people want to.
Anyone?
Jane, would you like to finish your thought regarding that the AI discussion that you were trying to?
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Thank you. So the remainder of the sentence was organizational design, the way we know today, the legacy traditional org design that most large organizations have today, is not conducive. It's not sustainable for what AI will cause to all of us. Single function specialty roles, roles that do not expect gradual, consistent learning and adaptiveness will be under heavy stress, under heavy scrutiny. And organizations that are not trying to do this in a therapeutic, improve themselves in a therapeutic way by maybe making themselves more lean, upskilling their employees, they would have to go through a surgery. And those surgeries are called RIFs. Very unfortunate. We already see this. So understanding and learning this at depth is actually pretty important. No one is 100% safe, but we could make ourselves a little safer. Okay. Thank you for asking. No questions. Does it mean we should wrap up, Brenda? Yes, no?
One last, everybody is, thank you, Nicholas, for bringing that in. I've had a little time lapse, on my, here. Anyhow, thank you very much, Gene, and everybody for being here. It's been fantastic and very educational, for sure.
I will try to keep I will offer the slide, well, not the slides, I'll point you to the repository, and also hopefully the recording will be available to everyone soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Brenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Gene. One more time.
Thank you once again. Thank you.
Yeah, so the turnout wasn't as big, but that's how it goes with our sessions. Like it's a third to a quarter. So, but I did know there was a lot of interest from